Awaken your spirit. Chosen ones. When a community can't destroy your truth, it will try to destroy your name. That's the silent law nobody admits, but everybody follows. And for the chosen ones, this law hits differently. One day you're minding your business, trying to live a life that makes sense. Then suddenly you're the villain in a story you didn't even audition for. Before you know it, rumors are running faster than your own shadow. Some of them so dramatic you'd think Netflix wrote them. Here's the part people don't like to talk about. Psychology shows that once a rumor is repeated by just 3 people, the human mind starts accepting it as community truth, even without evidence. That's how fragile perception is. That's how quickly innocence gets edited, repackaged, and broadcast like a cheap radio signal. And yet, this is where the suspense comes in. There's always a twist. Because the same community that tried to frame you, the same one that whispered your name like it was a crime scene, didn't realize they were laying the groundwork for their own embarrassment. They didn't expect that truth has a stubborn way of resurfacing, even when you're not fighting for it. They didn't expect someone among them to finally say, "Hold on, something's not adding up." Let's be honest, some of the rumors about you were so outrageous, you almost had to respect the creativity. At one point you probably thought, if I'm really this powerful, why am I still paying bills? Humor aside, the weight of being misunderstood can feel like a permanent shadow. But the irony is this: your so-called evil reputation says more about their fear than your character. They weren't exposing who you are. They were revealing who they are terrified to become. This is the story of how a community misjudged you, and how someone is finally about to free you from the blame they tried to bury you under. Let's uncover it. Number 1. They demonized you because your clarity exposes their confusion. People don't always attack you because you did something wrong. Sometimes they attack you because you make it harder for them to lie to themselves. That's what happens when you carry a level of clarity most people haven't worked for. You see through situations, through motives, through patterns, things others prefer to stay blind to. Your presence becomes uncomfortable because it quietly challenges the stories they built to justify their actions. And instead of dealing with that discomfort, they redirected it toward you. Turning you into the villain was easier than facing their own confusion. Your clarity wasn't loud or aggressive, but it was steady enough to unsettle anyone who was used to living with mental shortcuts. Every time you spoke honestly, kept your boundaries, or simply behaved in a way that didn't match their expectations, you unintentionally forced them to confront the truth they were avoiding. People don't like being exposed, especially when they've built an identity around pretending. So the best strategy they had was to flip the script and make you look like the problem. If they could label you as evil, cold, or untrustworthy, then they wouldn't have to admit that your insight made them feel lost. What made it worse for them was that you weren't trying to impress anyone. You weren't desperate for approval. You weren't begging for validation. That independence created even more tension because it removed their power to influence how you saw yourself. When people feel they can't control how you move, they try to control how others see you. Rumors became their coping mechanism, a childish way of regaining control in a situation where they felt exposed. The most ironic part is that the clarity they feared is the same clarity that will ultimately free you. Their confusion created the lie, but your consistency will destroy it. They can twist the story for a while, but they can't erase the truth you stand on. And deep down, they know that. That's why their hostility was so intense. It wasn't about hating you. It was about fearing what your understanding revealed about them. Number 2, they needed you to be the evil one so they could stay the victim. Some people build their entire world around a simple rule. If someone else is the problem, then they are automatically safe. It's easier to point fingers than to look in the mirror, and easier to blame you than to face the parts of themselves they don't want to admit. That's why communities, families, or groups sometimes latch on to a single person as the villain. You were chosen not because you deserved it, but because their survival depended on it. They needed someone to carry the weight of guilt, someone to make their own mistakes invisible. You became that person. Your presence highlighted their contradictions, their failures, and the things they wanted to hide. When you lived boldly, spoke your truth, or made decisions without waiting for approval, it cast their own compromises into sharp relief. They couldn't afford to be honest about themselves, so the easiest solution was to rewrite your story and assign you the label they could all agree on, the bad one. By making you the target, they protected their fragile sense of self and maintained the illusion that they were right, moral, or justified in everything they had done. You weren't guilty. You were a mirror they couldn't bear to look into. What made it even more absurd is how carefully they structured the narrative. Every rumor, every whisper, every sideways glance was a part of a strategy to keep their victim's story alive. If you tried to explain yourself, it would disrupt the illusion. If you stayed silent, it fed their version of the truth. No matter what you did, they found a way to make it about their comfort, not about fairness or reality. And that's the cruel genius of it. You became the villain so they could remain the hero in their own minds, even when their heroism was just a lie. Ultimately, the label they gave you says more about them than it ever did about you. They weren't exposing your flaws, they were hiding theirs. The community needed someone to blame, and you were standing too tall, too clear, and too honest to be ignored. That's why they chose you, why they painted you in darkness, and why, despite their stories, the truth about you will always shine through. Number 3. Their rumor was really a confession disguised as a warning. When people spread lies about you, what they are really doing is revealing their own inner chaos. Every accusation, every exaggerated story, every sideways comment they passed around wasn't just about you. It was a reflection of their fears, insecurities, and unresolved issues. They dressed it up as a warning to the community, but underneath it was a confession about themselves. By painting you as evil, dangerous, or untrustworthy, they were trying to distance themselves from the very feelings and impulses they carried inside. The rumor wasn't protection, it was projection. The most fascinating part is how often people don't realize this. They believe they are controlling the narrative, but in reality, every word they utter about you reveals more about who they are than who you are. If they said you were selfish, it might mean they struggle with their own selfishness. If they claimed you were manipulative, it could be because they know manipulation too intimately. The story they tell about you is a mirror, but they refuse to look into it. Instead, they insist you are the problem while secretly confessing the parts of themselves they cannot face. And yet, the very act of trying to warn others about you shows their vulnerability. It is a silent admission that they feel powerless in your presence. They recognized a quality in you, clarity, independence, or strength, that they could not replicate or contain. The rumor became their way of making sense of something they didn't understand. They framed it as danger because admitting admiration, envy, or fear would be too humiliating. Ironically, their warning is what eventually exposes the truth. Anyone paying attention can see the inconsistencies, the exaggerations, the signs of projection. While they thought they were controlling the story, they were handing over proof of their own inner conflict. The rumor they spread was never really about condemning you. It was a confession of the fear and insecurity they carry, and a reminder that sometimes the loudest lies reveal the deepest truths about those who tell them. Number 4, you were too unpredictable for their small, predictable world. Some people live their lives like a well-rehearsed play, sticking to scripts written by fear, habit, or tradition. Everything has to fit into their neat boxes, from behavior to relationships to the way the world should work. And then you appear, someone who refuses the script, someone who moves in ways they can't predict, someone who refuses to validate their sense of order. That unpredictability terrifies them more than anything else, because it exposes just how fragile their carefully constructed world really is. You weren't just different. You were a variable they couldn't calculate, a force they couldn't contain. Your actions, your decisions, and your very existence challenge their sense of control. They expect people to behave in certain ways, follow certain paths, and react to circumstances predictably. When you break those expectations, it doesn't just confuse them, it shakes them. And when people feel threatened, their instinct is to neutralize that threat. Since they can't stop your unpredictability, they try to destroy your reputation instead. Turning you into a villain is easier than admitting that someone can live freely without their permission. The irony is that unpredictability is not chaos, it's authenticity. You aren't harmful, you're just real. You're operating on your own terms, and that freedom is what triggers their panic. They aren't angry because of anything you did to them personally. They're angry because you remind them that their lives are smaller than they pretend. Every rumor, every whisper, every sideways glance is their attempt to draw boundaries around something they can't control. And yet, your unpredictability is also your shield. While they try to confine you to their narrative, your refusal to fit the mold keeps you untouchable. You can't be neatly defined or dismissed because you exist beyond their categories. That's why their fear escalates, why the rumors grow louder, and why they double down on lies. They know instinctively that unpredictability cannot be caged. The more they push, the more it proves that what they really fear is not what you've done, but the freedom you carry that they secretly wish they had. Number 5. Your growth made them rewrite your past into something darker. Growth is a quiet revolution, and some people can't handle the truth of it. As you evolved, learned, and stepped into your own power, those around you felt the walls of their control start to crumble. They had spent so long defining you in their minds. The child, the naive one, the troublemaker, the one they thought they understood. But suddenly you didn't fit the story anymore. Your growth exposed the limitations of their narrative. And when reality no longer matched their perception, they chose a familiar strategy. They rewrote history. Instead of acknowledging your progress, they painted it as something suspicious or dangerous. They took moments from your past and twisted them, assigning motives that never existed. Your successes became threats. Your independence became proof of recklessness. Every positive change you made was recast as evidence for their invented version of who you really are. Their minds refused to let you outgrow the version of yourself they had built, so they distorted reality to force you back into the box they were comfortable with. The tragedy of this is how deliberate it can be. Rumors aren't just careless whispers, they're carefully constructed illusions designed to preserve their own worldview. By rewriting your past, they gave themselves the comforting illusion that they always knew you were flawed, while simultaneously keeping themselves safe from the uncomfortable truth that you had grown beyond them. Their narrative protects them from facing their own stagnation, their jealousy, and their inability to change. The brilliance of your growth, however, is that it cannot be erased. Lies may temporarily cloud perception, but the truth of your evolution is visible in the way you live today. No rumor can undo the steps you've taken, the wisdom you've gained, or the strength you now carry. Their attempts to darken your history reveal their fear, not your reality. And when their stories finally collapse, It will be clear to everyone that the past they twisted was never yours to control. It was theirs to expose, and their fear of your growth did all the talking for them. Number 6. Their hate was not personal, it was inherited. Sometimes the anger directed at you isn't about anything you actually did, it's a handed-down story, a chain of resentment passed from one person to another like an unwanted heirloom. You become the target, not because of your actions, but because you are standing in the place where old grudges, old fears, and old insecurities have been waiting for someone to occupy. Communities, families, even groups of friends can carry narratives that predate your involvement, and when you show up, you step right into a story that was written long before you arrived. Their hatred is less about you and more about the unresolved tensions that they inherited. This inherited animosity is sneaky because it comes wrapped in the illusion of personal grievance. They talk about you as if they've uncovered your true nature, when in reality they are repeating a pattern they learned from others. Every warning, every accusation, every sideways remark is a recycled piece of someone else's suspicion passed down until it lands squarely on you. They rarely stop to examine it, and they rarely stop to question if it's fair. The story exists, and you are convenient. What's even more revealing is how they cling to it with pride. Inherited hate gives them a sense of identity. They are the vigilant ones, the guardians, the people who see the truth while everyone else is blind. They don't realize that their loyalty is to a lie, and that by repeating it, they are both silencing you and exposing their own inability to think for themselves. They inherited it because it served someone else, and they continue to carry it because it serves them. And yet, this inherited hate is powerless against authenticity. No rumor, no narrative, no recycled accusation can change the truth of who you are. The moment you live freely, consistently, and boldly, the chain begins to break. The story they've inherited starts to unravel, revealing that the real problem was never you. It was the unresolved fears and projections of those who passed it along. Their hate speaks louder about them than it ever will about you. Number 7. You carried an energy they couldn't categorize, so they condemned it. Energy is invisible, yet it speaks louder than words. Some people have an aura that feels unshakable, a presence that commands attention without demanding it. You carried that energy, calm, steady, intense, unpredictable, but most around you didn't know how to interpret it. When someone can't categorize another person, the instinct is not curiosity, it's fear. They fear what they cannot label because it reminds them that the world isn't as simple or controllable as they pretend. And when fear meets ignorance, condemnation is the default response. They couldn't define you, so they tried to define you away. Every step you took outside their comfort zone became proof of danger. Every decision that didn't align with their expectations was twisted into evidence that you were different in the worst way. Their minds needed categories: hero, villain, troublemaker, safe, familiar. You refused to fit any of those neat boxes. That refusal exposed their limitations and threatened their sense of understanding. Instead of learning from it or accepting that some people simply exist beyond conventional labels, they attacked. What made their response inevitable was that your energy wasn't performative. You didn't try to impress anyone or bend yourself to social rules. You simply existed in your own frequency. That authenticity, rare, unshakable, and undeniable, makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to face their own compromises and limitations. They couldn't own your energy, so they attempted to demonize it, to make it appear as something threatening rather than extraordinary. The irony is that this condemnation only highlights your power. Their inability to categorize you is proof that you are beyond ordinary perception. The more they label, whisper, and speculate, the more they confirm that you are not meant to be understood in conventional terms. Your energy isn't a problem, it's a statement. And the truth is that no rumor, no fear, and no attempt at control can contain it. Those who try only reveal their weakness, while your presence quietly continues to defy definition, untouchable and undeniable. Number 8. Your silence didn't make you guilty. It made you uncontrollable. Silence is often misunderstood, especially by people who are used to controlling narratives. When you refused to defend yourself, when you didn't respond to every rumor or explain every action, they interpreted it as weakness or guilt. But in reality, your silence was the ultimate power. It made you unpredictable, unmanageable, and untouchable. People who thrive on gossip and control rely on reaction. They need to see fear, anger, or desperation, because those emotions give them leverage. By staying silent, you denied them that leverage entirely. You became a force they couldn't manipulate. They tried to fill your quiet with their own stories, assuming that if you didn't speak, they could define you. Every accusation, every exaggerated tale, every sideways comment was their attempt to claim control. But silence has a way of revealing truth without words. It forces people to confront the absurdity of their own claims. It makes them wrestle with the gap between reality and the narrative they've spun. And that gap terrifies them because they know deep down that it's not you who is vulnerable, it's them. Your silence also made them impatient, frustrated, and reckless. People who spread rumors expect responses, explanations, and defenses. When none come, they escalate, overcompensate, and eventually expose the weaknesses in their own story. In trying to provoke a reaction, they show their own fear, insecurity, and lack of evidence. Every desperate attempt to label you, to control perception, only highlights your restraint and composure. You are untouchable precisely because you refuse to participate in their game. Ultimately, your silence is a shield and a statement. It communicates that your truth does not depend on their recognition or approval. It signals that you are beyond manipulation, beyond rumor, beyond the shallow attempts to define you, and that is what drives them crazy. The fact that they cannot corner you, cannot explain you away, and cannot make you fit into the box they desperately want you to occupy. Your silence is not weakness. It is the loudest declaration of freedom they will ever hear. Number 9. They feared the possibility that you might be right about life. Sometimes the anger directed at you has nothing to do with who you are, and everything to do with what you represent. Your perspective, your decisions, your way of seeing the world, they challenge the convenient illusions others live by. When you make choices that contradict the norms, break patterns, or embrace truths they're unwilling to face, it creates a quiet panic. They don't just fear what you've done, they fear that you might actually be right. That possibility alone is enough to trigger hostility. People build their lives around comfort zones, excuses, and half-truths. They construct moral maps and social rules that allow them to feel secure, even if those rules are arbitrary or self-serving. When someone like you comes along, someone who acts with clarity and integrity, they see a reflection of a life they could have lived or could still live if they were brave enough. And that reflection terrifies them because it exposes their compromises, laziness, and fears. Attacking you becomes easier than confronting the uncomfortable thought that maybe they've been wrong all along. What's striking is how intensely they try to rewrite the narrative around you. Every rumor, exaggeration, and sideways comment is designed not just to discredit you, but to protect themselves from your truth. They fear that if enough people acknowledge your perspective, their own illusions will crumble. By painting you as dangerous or evil, they can maintain the comforting idea that your life choices are errors, not wisdom. In their minds, discrediting you keeps them safe from the risk of self-reflection. Ironically, their fear of your perspective only confirms your impact. The more desperate their attacks, the more they prove that you've touched something real, something undeniable. Your clarity, your courage, your way of living, these are not threats to you, but to the illusions they cling to. And in the end, the very thing they feared, the possibility that you might be right, becomes the measure of your strength. Their attacks are loud, but your truth is quiet, consistent, and impossible to erase. Number 10. They used morality as a weapon because truth was never on their side. Some people don't argue with facts. They argue with feelings, impressions, and moral labels. When the truth is inconvenient, uncomfortable, or completely against their narrative, morality becomes their tool of choice. By claiming the high ground, they can attack, shame, and condemn without ever presenting evidence. You become wrong, not because of anything you did, but because they need someone to carry the weight of guilt while they remain untouchable. Morality becomes a weapon, and the louder they shout, the less anyone questions the emptiness behind it. They twist right and wrong into a language that suits their story. Your every action, decision, or word is scrutinized and reframed as proof of some moral failing. Even neutrality is painted as complicity. Even kindness becomes manipulation. Their obsession with your morality isn't about ethics. It's about control. They can't change the truth, so they try to reshape perception. They want people to fear your presence, distrust your judgment, and question your intentions. And the most powerful part is that this weapon doesn't require justification. All it needs is repetition. The more people hear it, the more it feels real, regardless of whether it ever was. What they fail to realize is that morality isn't a weapon. It's a lens. And no lens can alter reality. You aren't defined by their twisted interpretations. The more they attack with righteous indignation, the more they expose their insecurity, their envy, and their fear. Every moral judgment they hurl at you is a confession that they can't match your integrity, that they can't live in the same alignment with truth that you do. In the end, their moral weapon is nothing more than a mask for weakness. It cannot hold up against consistency, authenticity, or courage. While they try to manipulate perception with righteous anger, you exist beyond it. Their stories may be loud, but your truth is steady. Morality, thrown like a weapon, can intimidate the unprepared, but it cannot change the reality that you are grounded in honesty, strength, and clarity. Their attacks reveal more about them than they ever will about you. Number 11. Their hostility escalated because your resilience made their rumors ineffective. Rumors are powerful when they find cracks in a person's confidence, but your resilience left no cracks to exploit. Every false story, every sideways comment, every exaggeration they spread bounced off you. You didn't react with panic, anger, or desperation. You simply continued living your life with quiet consistency. That was unbearable for them. Their power depended on seeing you falter, on watching you crumble under the weight of public opinion. When none of it worked, their frustration turned into rage. The more you refused to break, the more they felt compelled to escalate. Your resilience is a force they couldn't control or predict. They thrived on chaos, on reaction, on stirring storms they could watch from the sidelines. But you refused to give them that satisfaction. They weren't just frustrated, they were enraged because their stories, their warnings, their carefully crafted narratives all failed to manipulate you or the perception of you. Every attempt to tarnish your image exposed their desperation rather than your flaws. And desperation is a dangerous thing. It leads people to overreach, to invent bolder lies, to act more aggressively than they ever would if you were vulnerable. What they didn't understand is that resilience isn't passive. It's a form of resistance that actively undermines control. Your ability to remain steady in the face of attacks forced them into illogical, exaggerated behavior. They tried to provoke, to shame, to isolate you, but each attempt only highlighted their weakness. Every rumor, no matter how loud, became a reflection of their fear rather than a reflection of you. In truth, your resilience is what will ultimately silence the noise around you. The longer they push, the more obvious it becomes that the problem is theirs, not yours. While they double down on lies, you continue growing, learning, and thriving. Your life, your choices, and your integrity serve as proof that rumors cannot touch you. Their hostility may escalate, but your resilience doesn't just withstand it. It exposes it for what it really is, a desperate attempt to mask their own failure. Number 12. Someone eventually questioned the lie, and that single doubt cracked their entire structure. Rumors live and thrive in silence. They grow in the spaces where no one dares to challenge them, multiplying with every retelling, gaining strength simply because they go unchallenged. But it only takes one person to break that cycle. One voice of doubt is enough to crack the foundation of an entire narrative built on fear, manipulation, and repetition. The moment someone stops believing blindly, starts asking questions, or refuses to participate in the collective condemnation, the house of lies begins to wobble. That single spark of skepticism can ignite the collapse of a story that seemed unstoppable. For those who spread rumors, this is terrifying. Their sense of control relies on unanimity. They assume everyone will follow the script they've written, and any disruption threatens to expose the fragility of their power. When someone raises a question, even quietly, it undermines the credibility they fought so hard to manufacture. Suddenly, the exaggerated tales, the accusations, and the whispers no longer hold weight. They start looking like desperation, insecurity, and projection. Their carefully constructed illusion begins to unravel, and the very people who once amplified the rumor start noticing cracks in the story. The irony is that this single doubt doesn't have to be loud or dramatic to be effective. It doesn't need proof or confrontation. It simply needs to exist. Human perception is wired to notice inconsistency, and once someone publicly expresses hesitation, it forces others to reconsider what they've accepted as truth. Momentum shifts quietly but irreversibly, and the rumor loses its power. What this reveals is that truth doesn't need armies. It only needs one brave mind. One person questioning a lie can dismantle a network of deception. And in the context of your story, that doubt is the key to freedom. It shows that no matter how loud or persistent falsehoods are, they cannot withstand scrutiny. Lies may dominate for a time, but a single spark of questioning is enough to let the light in, to shatter the narrative, and to remind everyone that reality cannot be permanently silenced. Number 13. The truth was never hidden. It was just overshadowed by noise. Truth doesn't need to fight. It simply exists. The problem is that in a world full of noise, falsehoods, exaggerations, and manipulations, truth often gets drowned out. For the chosen ones, the truth about who you really are was never missing. It was present, steady, and undeniable, but the clamor of gossip, rumors, and community judgment created a smokescreen. People didn't see it because they were too busy listening to the loud, distorted echoes designed to confuse and intimidate. Noise always seems louder than reality, but it's fragile. It may dominate attention temporarily, but it cannot change the essence of what is real. The people spreading lies counted on this principle. They relied on volume over substance, repetition over evidence, and fear over reason. They assumed that if enough mouths repeated the same false story, it would gain traction and feel true. And for a time it worked. People began to react, to believe, and to participate in the collective distortion. But volume is never a substitute for authenticity. The louder the noise, the more desperate it is. It is always trying to hide a lack of foundation. The moment someone listens closely, the inconsistencies, the contradictions, and the manipulations become obvious. Your life, your actions, and your integrity have always spoken quietly but insistently above the chaos. While they attempted to dominate perception with stories and whispers, your reality continued. Every step you take, every choice you make, and every moment you live authentically is a reaffirmation of truth that cannot be erased. Noise may temporarily obscure clarity, but it cannot erase it. Eventually, the disparity between the loud lies and the steady truth becomes undeniable. People start noticing the cracks, questioning the narrative, and seeing the difference between what is said and what actually is. The truth was never missing. It was always present, waiting for the moment when the noise would falter. And when it does, it becomes impossible to ignore, reminding everyone that authenticity outlasts rumors, consistency outshines chaos, and reality never needs permission to exist. Number 14. In the end, the same community that condemned you will quietly rewrite history to pretend they always knew you were innocent. Time has a way of revealing truth, and people have a way of rewriting memory. The same community that once painted you as evil, dangerous, or untrustworthy will eventually adjust their story, not because they've had a sudden moral awakening, but because the reality of your character cannot be ignored. They will quietly, almost imperceptibly, alter their recollections, pretending they always knew the truth, acting as though they were never part of the chorus that tried to condemn you. This isn't about justice or accountability. It's about self-preservation. Admitting they were wrong would force them to face their own complicity, their own willingness to believe lies for comfort or conformity. It's easier to claim insight retroactively than to confront the embarrassment of their past behavior. This rewriting of history is telling. It reveals how invested they were in the illusion rather than reality. They feared your clarity, your independence, and your authenticity because it reflected the truth they couldn't face about themselves. They attacked you to maintain control over perception, but the very act of condemnation left evidence of their fear and insecurity. Eventually, when that fear becomes untenable, they shift the narrative subtly, erasing their role in it and recasting themselves as bystanders who always knew you were innocent. The irony is that this retrospective claim of foresight can never erase what actually happened. The whispers, rumors, and sideways glances are still etched into the memory of those who witnessed it. Their silent rewriting is a testament to your endurance, your resilience, and the truth that refuses to be silenced. It proves that no matter how loud the condemnation, no matter how elaborate the lies, authenticity cannot be hidden indefinitely. In the end, their efforts to recast history do more to reveal their fear than to diminish your reality. The truth of who you are remains untouched, unwavering, and undeniable. And when they quietly pretend they always knew, it is the loudest acknowledgement of your integrity and the fragility of the false narrative they once tried so desperately to impose. The story of the chosen ones is a testament to the power of truth, resilience, and authenticity. Every rumor, every sideways glance, every attempt to tarnish your name was never truly about you. It was about fear, insecurity, and the need for control in those around you. From being demonized for clarity, misjudged for your growth, and condemned for your energy, to facing inherited hate and moral attacks, each attempt to define or limit you only revealed the fragility of the narratives others built. The more they tried to twist your story, the stronger your reality became. Your silence, your consistency, and your unwavering presence were shields against manipulation, proving that authenticity cannot be silenced, and that truth ultimately outlasts every lie. In time, even the loudest voices of condemnation will falter. The same people who tried to rewrite history will quietly adjust their memories, but their efforts cannot erase the proof of who you are. The proof lives in your actions, your growth, and the unshakable integrity you carry. Their fear, their hostility, and their desperate attempts to control perception all serve as a mirror reflecting their own weaknesses, not yours. And in that reflection, your strength becomes undeniable. This is more than a story of overcoming false accusations. It's a celebration of your ability to rise above, to remain untouchable, and to allow the truth to speak louder than any rumor ever could. You weren't destroyed by the narrative others tried to impose. You transcended it. Every moment of resilience, every act of authenticity, and every step forward proves that you were never the villain in their story. You were always the truth they feared. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let's spread the truth, shine light on authenticity, and empower those who refuse to be silenced. Stay awakened, chosen ones.